Final hour OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Brian Hayes and Frankie Corrado head out to Edmonton later in the hour. Tom Gazzola will join us. His take on Stan Bowman being hired as the GM of the Oilers today. The reaction within the market, the explanation from Jeff Jackson on why Bowman got the job, how big of a job it is as well. I mean, the Oilers are expected to compete for a Stanley Cup next year, probably the favorites to do so.
And re-sign Leon Draisaitl and keep Connor McDavid there for life. Like there are some big events that need to happen for that organization, and like I think that's why you go out and bring in a guy like Stan Bowman, who has a certain amount of pedigree, has obviously had success in the league. Like you're basically tasking him with keeping this core group together for a long time and keeping two of the best players in the game as Oilers for life.
Yeah, and exactly. And I mean, we're all aware of how it ended in Chicago with Stan Bowman and, what happened with Kyle Beach and the Blackhawks organization as a whole. And as a result, he's been out of the game for years. But in terms of his hockey resume, it's actually it's kind of similar to Ken Holland. Like Holland did it for a lot longer, but he won multiple cups. By the end in Detroit, it was getting ugly, right? Like the cap structure wasn't great. The team wasn't great. It's the same thing in Chicago. Like that's another thing I think people in Edmonton are talking about, that, yes, he played a role. Of course he played a role. And then winning multiple Stanley Cups, him, having a team that was very, very competitive for a long time. But by the end, it was really ugly because of Stan Bowman and the job he did in Chicago.
Leading up to it, Hayes, don't forget, Dale Talon built a lot of that team before Stan Bowman got there. So I think it's bookended on either side, with Stan Bowman having success and Dale Talon obviously set the table. And then towards the end, it did get ugly in Chicago.
Yeah, and it still is. I mean, to the point where they're still kind of digging out. Now, it was well worth it. I think if you're a Blackhawk fan, you got 3 Cups, you got Taves, Kane, Keith, Seabrook, Hossa. Like they were a juggernaut. They were probably they were a salary cap dynasty. Maybe not in the truest form, but they won 3 Cups, I think, in 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah,
3 and 6. I mean, that's just incredible how good they were.
And there were a lot of casualties of the cap there, right?
Yes.
Like there were only basically 5 guys that stuck around for the whole tenure of it. It was Kane, Taves, Seabrook, Keith, I guess you could say Chalmerson and Hossa. So there you go. There's 7 guys that stuck around for everything. Andrew Ladd had to go. Bufflin had to go. Versteeg had to go. Patrick Sharp eventually left. Like everyone outside of those guys was a casualty.
Well, and one more would be Joe Quenneville, who was the coach the whole time. And now that Stan Bowman is back, I wonder if Quenneville will be hired at some point. It's a different role. Like the GM doesn't speak every day. He doesn't have as big of a profile in the marketplace. The head coach, wherever Quenneville goes, he's going to speak every single day, represents the team every single day. It may be different, but I would be surprised, be shocked if a team didn't call him and pursue him at some point.
Well, I guess we got to wait for the vacancies, right? Like we just saw the last one get filled, and Dean Evison goes to Columbus. And I don't know if the Columbus vacancy was going to make sense for Quenneville anyways, but I don't know. There were a ton of firings this year. I would imagine that is a trend that is going to continue in the NHL because it's hard to get out of cap hell. So you change the coach, and so we'll see. I don't know. We'll see who's the first team to kind of bring it up that, hey, Joel Quenneville is in the mix. He's in conversations.
Yeah,
here.
it's going to happen for sure. It may be a mid-season move. Maybe something 2 months into this season, because there's always firings 15 games into the season.
Yeah.
Right. Edmonton being an example last year, where you get a team that has high expectations that stumbles out of the gate, they're going to make changes. So that will undoubtedly happen at some point. So, we'll head out to Edmonton in about 25 minutes. Ross Tucker will join us, host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, former NFLer himself, here in a moment. I'm seeing on ESPN.com, they've ranked the top 25 NFL players since the year 2000. I don't think it would surprise anybody that Tom Brady is number 1 on that list. Do you want to take a guess at who they have at number 2? Who do you think is number 2 of the best NFL players since 2000?
Peyton Manning?
It is not Peyton. Peyton is number 4 on this list.
Okay. Is it a quarterback?
It is a quarterback.
Aaron Rodgers?
It is not Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is number 9 on this list. This quarterback is still currently playing.
All right, just hit me with
It's Patrick
Stop
Mahomes.
Embarrassing me.
Patrick
Okay.
Mahomes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Patrick. Well, the thing is, it does because the conversation has evolved to the point where it's like Brady and Mahomes and like no other quarterback is included in that anymore. I'm not sure that's should be legit or is justified. Like like Joe Montana's just not a part of that conversation anymore. Peyton Manning, he's not involved anymore. John Elway is not involved anymore. Right. It feels like it's a 2-horse race now. It's like Brady or Mahomes, and that's like historically GOAT status. But this is since 2000, and again, according to ESPN, and I guess whoever was voting on this, they had Tom Brady at 1, Patrick Mahomes at 2, Aaron Donald at 3, Peyton Manning 4, Randy Moss 5. Those are the 5 best players in the NFL since the year 2000, according to ESPN and ESPN.com. To chat about that, we're joined now by former NFLer himself and host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Find him on socials at Ross Tucker NFL. Here's Ross Tucker. What's up, Ross?
What's up? You guys tell me.
Well, let me ask you this out of the gate. I mean, how do you feel about this? ESPN, I guess their voters decided the 5 best players since 2000. Brady 1, Mahomes 2, Aaron Donald 3, Peyton Manning 4, Randy Moss 5. Do you take issue with any of those players in particular, the order, any omissions? Where do you stand on that?
Well, my rookie year was 2001, so this is kind of right in my wheelhouse and strike zone for sure. I've got no problem with Brady 1 and Mahomes 2. I think I heard you guys talking before you brought me on. I think it's pretty much acknowledged now that Brady's 1, right? I think the question is whether or not Mahomes will catch him. Mm-hmm. I think that's why you don't hear people talk about Elway or Peyton Manning or Joe Montana. I think most people acknowledge that Brady did more than Montana, Brady's better than Montana, whatever.
Yep.
And so now, because of what Mahomes has done so far in his career, and in particular the last couple years, I think that, we're at that stage now where it's like, wow, could Mahomes actually catch him? Which is interesting. As for the rest of the list, I think it's pretty good. I'm sure I'm missing someone, but the way I look at it is Aaron Donald's, in the conversation for being one of the best defensive players ever. So I think he's certainly deserving of being on that list. I think Peyton Manning's probably a top 5 quarterback of all time. There are some people that still have him 1. That even without as many rings or whatever, they still think he's the best guy that ever did it. So I think Manning deserves to be there. There are also people that believe Randy Moss is the best receiver ever. Mm-hmm. What I would submit to you on that one is that maybe he was the most gifted, but you'll never convince me anyone other than Jerry Rice Jerry Rice's numbers are so much better than everybody else's. It's almost embarrassing to make an argument against Jerry Rice. I'm trying to think of what other guys they didn't include that could be included. And so when I think of that, I think of who are guys that are considered like maybe the best ever or all-time greats at their position. Mm-hmm. And a couple guys that come to mind for me, didn't J.J. Watt win Defensive Player of the Year like 3 times?
Yes, he did. He won it, and he's number 7 on this list. He's at 7.
Okay, yeah. You got to be pretty high if you won it that many times. And then, I don't know. I don't know if people
Ray Lewis is at 8.
Yep. Ray Lewis, best player I ever played against.
Really?
I can tell you that much right now.
Wow.
In 2004, I started at center for the Buffalo Bills against the Ravens. And I remember during the week, I could just tell that in most of the blocking schemes, I was going to be blocking Ray Lewis. And even like the practice squad offensive line was like, Tuck, you got to block Ray almost every play. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to get famous. Guys, that is not what happened in that game. that is not what happened in that game. He was awesome. I think you can make a very strong case for him as the best off-the-ball linebacker ever.
Yep.
So I think he should be in the conversation. I guess I'm trying to think who's considered the best center ever, because I think Kelsey's probably got to be up there in terms of best centers ever. And I would put I would think either Travis Kelce or Gronk would be on that list, because to me, I think that, Travis Kelce and Gronk are kind of the Jerry Rice, Randy Moss argument. Mm-hmm. In other words, I think Rob Gronkowski is the best tight end that's ever lived. However, because of the injuries and the shortened career and what Kelce keeps doing every year, it's kind of hard to take that from Kelce and give it to Gronk when Kelsey's seemingly doing it at such a high level for so long. But then I think, okay, well, who would you rather have in the red zone? Probably Gronk. Who would you rather have as a blocker? Definitely Gronk. Who's better run after catch? Still maybe Gronk. You know what I mean? That guy was just a total monster.
If we're doing this list, in another 25 years, let's say, what would have to happen for Patrick Mahomes to be number one on this list? Would he have to have 7 Super Bowl wins, or could he do it with 5? What are we talking about in another 25 years that would make Mahomes number one ahead of Brady?
Well, there's always going to be people that will just count championships, right? There will always be people that will just count rings, which is dumb, right? That's like saying Jim Plunkett was better than Dan Marino or whoever, right? Because he has 2, That part of it, there's always going to be some people that make that argument. That's not me. It's blended, right? It's blended what we saw, the eye test, the statistics, and then accomplishments, and in particular team accomplishments do matter. But, for me, where Mahomes is really going to have trouble is on the longevity part of it, right? So much of what makes him special is his second reaction plays, his ability to move and make a play. And I guess I wonder, is that still working in his late 30s? Is it working in his early 40s? Brady was just beating you with his brain and accuracy and death by a million paper cuts. It's why there are still some people that don't think Brady's that great, right? It's because how often did Brady do something that was wow, did you see that 7-yard throw to Welker? You know what I mean? That, there's not a lot of things that Brady did that wowed you. It's the consistency and the longevity and the totality that wowed you. But no, I think if Mahomes wins 5 Super Bowls and appears in 8 or 9, but wins a bunch of MVPs and plays till he's 40, I think there'll be people that will say he's better. I mean, there's already people that think he's a better quarterback than Brady ever was, and that Brady benefited from this and that and this and that. As if Mahomes doesn't benefit greatly from Andy Reid and Travis Kelce,
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly, and trying to quantify, IQ, football IQ, baseball IQ, hockey IQ, it's impossible. It's not there's no stat sheet. And it happens, I think, in every sport where Brady's ability to break down a defense and read it. It's not that Mahomes is incapable of doing that. Clearly, he's great at it also. But I don't know how to define the difference between the two. I don't know. I can look at stats. I can look at touchdowns and interceptions, et cetera. I can't talk about brain activity when the ball's snapped.
Well, and Brady is going to be hurt. His legacy is going to be hurt over time in the sense that we are such a highlight and video-driven culture that let's just fast forward to 20 years from now, Mahomes retires. And let's say there is a debate between Mahomes and Brady at that point. Let's say Mahomes wins 5 and goes to 8 or whatever, and people are having that debate. Well, there's going to be 14-year-old kids on, whatever the TikTok is 20 years from now. They're going to pull up highlights of Brady and pull up highlights of Patrick Mahomes and be like, what the heck are you guys talking about? This isn't even close. You know what I mean? because Brady won't have any highlights. Brady's highlights are just like a nice, accurate throw on time to Gronk. It's like there's nothing that wows you about Brady physically, which to me, by the way, makes what he accomplished all the more impressive, right? He doesn't have a gigantic arm. He's not Josh Allen. He's not, a good athlete at all. Not at all. I mean, we used to make fun of him in the offseason when I was there doing agility drills, and he would get like mad and do it again, like the rope drill, like the ladder on the ground. Like, dude, you already won 3 Super Bowls, bro. Like, we don't care how you do in the ladder drill. But he did, and he didn't like that we would met. But like that was not. I mean, he's like one of the worst NFL athletes you've seen.
Well, and you know what? That'll beg the question, I think, when we start talking about legacy. Who scares you more, or who scared you more if you were the opponent? Because I think about hockey and I think about certain players in their prime, and they're on the other bench, and it's like that guy could chew us up tonight, and he very well did on a lot of nights. I think of guys like Crosby, Ovechkin, Joe Thornton. Like when it comes down to it, who would be the scarier opponent? Brady when he was playing at his best, or Mahomes, basically when he is playing at his best, which is, right now?
That reminds me, I've got 2 questions for you guys, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
One's not even a question. One is, a couple weeks ago, I was at Jason Kelsey's golf tournament, and I met Eric Lindros for the first time.
Yes.
So I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I was a Flyers fan, and he was like, his heyday when I was in high school, so I think they went maybe in 97 to the Stanley Cup.
97 Cup final, yep.
Like
Yep, 97.
Yeah. Dude, guys, he's like a decent amount bigger than me.
He's a monster.
If you saw him, you would think he played O-line in the NFL. I was walking into the event next to him, and I was like, what, this guy looks like he played O-line for the Eagles like in the 90s. Who is this guy? Like I couldn't. And I finally meet him. He's like, Eric Lindros. I'm like, like his hands. I mean,
imagine fighting him.
The idea of that guy
fighting
on
him.
Skates.
Yeah.
The idea of that guy on skates is like scary. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then my question for you is, I know you guys are based in Toronto, right?
Yes, we're in Toronto. Yep.
So I filled in for Dan Patrick during the Stanley Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we talked a lot about Edmonton and Canada and everything. And we brought on a guy from Calgary, and like all he wanted was for Edmonton to lose. Like he desperately wanted Edmonton to lose. They hate Edmonton.
Right. And
I was like, wow, really? Because I wanted Edmonton to win because I wanted it for the people of Canada. And then I was talking to a Canadian who didn't want them to win. And I'm like, what the? So I was curious what it was like sort of in Ontario or the eastern,
it's very it's
part of the country.
It's not as much like, in Toronto, there's not much of a connect. Like Edmonton's like a 4-hour flight from here. Like there's no connection to it. But Calgary to Edmonton is like Philly and New York. You know what I mean? Like you're not rooting for the giant, like the Yankees to do well because they haven't won in a long time, right?
But were you guys in Toronto rooting for Edmonton?
No.
The Canada could win a cup? Or is it like, no, we want to win ours?
No, you want to, exactly. If you're a Leaf fan, you want the Leafs to do it. That's what you're banking on.
Because we've had this 31-year drought now where a Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup. So I think every time a Canadian team gets there, all the other fan bases say, you're not going to be the one that does it. Like we're going to be the one to do it. So
right.
I don't think all of Canada is getting behind, one
especially
team. There
in
are
Calgary.
people that will.
Especially in Calgary. That's the biggest rivalry, the Battle of Alberta, they call it. It's Pittsburgh, Philly, I guess, to use Pennsylvania as an example.
It's so funny to me. Like I live in central Pennsylvania. I actually, by the way, you guys will appreciate this. We have season tickets to the Hershey Bears, AHL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I love AHL. I can't, I'm in the second row. I can't tell the difference between those kids.
What's the chant, Ross? Guys. What is it? BEARS, 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 Bears. Is that what they do there?
That is correct.
Oh,
there you
and
go.
My seats, I only go to a few games a year, but my seats are right next to the opposing team penalty box. It is unbelievable how young those guys are, right? Like they're flying around, killing each other. Like hockey live is just amazing in person. And then they get in the penalty box, and I'm like, I said to my wife, I'm like, this guy doesn't even shave. There's like, there's no, like, this guy's got nothing. I always offer him a beer, and they're always like, no, I can't. I got to play the rest of the game. It's funny.
Yeah, it's electric down there, man. You're right. The Big E, like Eric Lindros, you talk about striking fear. Frankie just asked you about performance. You talk to guys that played against him in his prime, terrifying. Like, absolutely terrifying.
Like a freight train.
He is a monster, and he played with an attitude. He was always pissed. He fought. He hit. He was a menace, man. He was
a
menace.
He was there with Leclerc. Leclerc's not a small guy either.
No, the Legion of Doom, man. Him and Michael Renberg, right? That line was unreal. They were great.
And we still didn't win it.
Couldn't win it.
Still haven't won it since the 70s. We have a longer drought than Canada.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. He is Ross Tucker. All right, myfrontpagestory.com. What's this all about? How do we get involved in this, Ross?
Dude, my buddy started the company. He's a writer. It's a genius company. You talk about a loved one, like let's say you have an anniversary or a birthday coming up for your wife or your mom or whoever. You talk to one of their writers for 10 minutes and tell them how great your wife is or your mom, whoever you're getting the story for. They write this incredible story, get a couple pictures from you, and then it looks like it's on the cover of the newspaper. Framed, beautiful. Just go to the website, check it out. I highly encourage everybody. myfrontpagestory.com. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Like, once you see it, you'll see why it's so awesome and why pretty much everybody that gets one ends up crying, because they read these quotes where it's like, I never thank her enough for everything she did for me or does for me. They cry almost every time. So it's especially money like Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. So what I tell everybody is just go to myfrontpagestory.com, check it out, throw your email address in there, and I think they email you right away like a 20% code, but then they'll also send you a reminder email like a month before Valentine's Day or Mother's Day. So you'll be money. You'll be all set for the major gift-giving holidays. myfrontpagestory.com, myfrontpagestory.com.
All right, Ross. I love it. Thanks for doing this, buddy. We'll do it again soon.
Of course. Yeah, my pleasure. Great talking with you guys.
You got it. Ross Tucker Football Podcast. And calls games, talks football, played the game. Interesting.
Dude, he's at Hershey Bears games.
They
just won. You know who scored the winner, the championship goal?
No.
Matty Strome, the youngest Strome brother.
Wow, come on.
Yeah, for
Good
the Hershey Bears.
Wow, that's great.
And you know who's a huge Bears fan?
Who's that?
He's at all the games. Brucey Boudreau.
Brucey lives down there. You're right. That's where he got to start, didn't he, coaching Hershey?
He's down there. He's at all the games. Him and Ross could be having beers for all we know.
Wow. Oh, he would love Bruce Boudreau.
Oh, yeah.
That is wild, though. What he says about Lindros is so true. Like, so many people, just in Toronto, up in Muskoka, whatever, over the years, how many people, I'm sure you've had the same thing. Like, I've met Eric a bunch of times, but people that meet him or see him for the first time, and they're like, man, I saw Lindros. He is massive, dude.
Yeah.
Like, he is all of 6'4", 6'5", and his shoulder, like, he's just, the idea of trying to stop him is just terrifying to
For
think
sure.
of. Like, him in his prime would have just been impossible to stop.
I was just kind of thinking of guys that I played against that I was petrified of on the ice. Mm-hmm. Like, I couldn't imagine going up against Lindros, especially like when he would run you through the boards,
yes,
and then dangle you the next shift.
Right.
Like he could do it all.
Oh, he'd have highlight shifts where he would get chugging on a forecheck and he's going to kill some guy, and he does, and then the puck breaks loose, he dangles someone, and then goes bar down, and you're like, who else can do that? Like, nobody else does that. And always talks about it because growing up in Southern Ontario, and they weren't in, I don't believe they were in the OHL at the same time, but obviously they were in the league for a long time together, teammates in Toronto for a while. But him in 94, 95, 95, 96, I think did he win the Hart? Is it the lockout year he won the Hart? I think so. And then 95, 96, he had 47 goals, 115 points, 163 penalty minutes, which means probably at least 10 fights.
That's a scary player, man.
Yeah.
I do wonder, though, like when it's all said and done and Mahomes is retired, who would have been considered the more scary quarterback to go up against, Brady or Mahomes? Because what Brady could do under pressure, down in games, the way he could dissect the defense on limited time, and Mahomes is cut from that cloth. But I don't know. I feel like there's still such a fear factor about, hey, you never bet against Brady. You just never know what he can do.
But I think that's the great equalizer in terms of comparing the two, that I think Mahomes is reaching that if he has not reached it already, where he's won 3 Super Bowls already, and he's won back-to-back Super Bowls. And look what he just did at Buffalo, at Baltimore, against the Niners.
Surgical, man.
Yeah, it's betting against Mahomes is just foolish. It shouldn't happen. And that's probably the best way. That's the way to chase Brady, because you can look at the arm strength, you can look at the highlight reels, you can look at the touchdowns versus interceptions, all that kind of stuff. And they both have, immaculate statistics. And they're both going to win, and they're both going to go to the playoffs, and they both have great coaches, Belichick and Reed. They both have great weapons, Gronk and Kelsey, and you go down the list. But are you clutch? If there's 2 minutes left in the game and you have the ball in your hands, is it just understood you're going to score and win the game? That's what Brady seemingly did every single year. And it feels like Mahomes is doing that too, which is just incredible. All right, Stan Bowman, hired GM out in Edmonton. Tom Gazzola will join us. His take on this hiring, the reaction in the marketplace, where the Oilers go from here. We'll get to that next. All right, so the Edmonton Oilers had been looking for a new GM ever since Ken Holland left the organization. Jeff Jackson got to work quickly. They made a bunch of moves, made a bunch of signings, a couple of trades, and they're a really good team. They're in Game 7 of the Cup final, and they're basically bringing the band back with some additions, some positive additions. Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner. They're a really good team with high expectations. And I think a lot of people in Edmonton were thinking maybe Jeff Jackson just keep being the GM, even though he had stated on the record many times that was not his plan. He wasn't going to do that. He was going to hire somebody. And a few weeks ago it came out, it had been reported by a number of people that Stan Bowman was in the running, and he was reinstated, I think, on July 1st. I'm pretty sure
we talked about it. We talked about it on Free Agent Frenzy. The news came down, and we were all sitting there on the front panel with Duthie, and it was like, here we go. We got to talk about it. Yeah, so. Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville both reinstated, and it did not take Stan Bowman long to get a new job, and it's one of the more coveted jobs in the game because he's the GM of maybe the best team in the league out in Edmonton. And to chat about it, we're joined now by Edmonton Sports Talk host, co-host of the Hello Hockey and NHL Network correspondent. Here's Tom Gazzola joining us. What's happening, Tom?
What a day, guys. Yeah, that was something, man. That was a different type of press conference for sure. I've seen some doozies here in Edmonton, as have been well documented, and this one had a bit of a heaviness to it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the questions were going to be coming at Jackson rapidly, at Bowman rapidly in terms of Bowman's history in Chicago, the Kyle Beach situation, him being out of the league for quite some time. How do you think Bowman in particular answered those questions, and do you get the impression the fan base is, I guess, feeling like it was an adequate explanation in terms of what he had to say today?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with this. On our station, the fan base was overwhelmingly negative. I mean, the stuff you saw on social media, we were getting it on all of our shows. The text line was lighting up. It was overwhelmingly negative. And this is a market as crazy as it is about the Oilers and hockey in general, where if they make a crazy decision in regard to stuff on the ice, usually it's about 50-50. You get a split unless everybody's unanimous and they love something. And this one was the first time in a long time where I saw it overwhelmingly negative. So I'll start with that. And I don't know how much of what Bowman said in that press conference would change a lot of the opinion that fans of this team had even before he spoke. So, and listen, there's a stubbornness to hockey fans. There's a stubbornness to Oilers fans as well, as we know. Now, in regard to what Stan Bowman said, how he said it, I do believe he was sincere in him taking ownership for what happened or his involvement in not saying anything. He said he learned about what the silence can do and how much of a negative impact that had and can have. I think he was sincere in describing the work he did with the Respect Group and Sheldon Kennedy specifically. I think that was genuine and heartfelt, and it's a credit to him for taking that opportunity and running with it. He worked with WHL teams, started with Edmonton, Red Deer, and Calgary, put a respect charter into place. That was part of Sheldon Kennedy's op-ed. Let's call it a vote of support for Stan Bowman, for those that maybe didn't read it. But and then that was also, something that went from the 3 Alberta teams that he worked with to the rest of the WHL. So I think that stuff is sincere. I really believe that he was heartfelt in that. How much did it move the needle? My guess would be not much. And the magnitude of what happened, how shocking it was in the world of hockey a few years ago when everything came to the forefront and was made public. I think that's very much still top of mind in the hockey world. And so, I mean, he can be sincere and he can be apologetic, which is good. I don't know how much that'll impact things. And he says he wants to earn the respect back, and good on him.
Yeah, and you talk about earning the respect back. Like, how much of that has to do with continuing with what he's done, like making that an ongoing process and not just, stopping because now you're busy because you have responsibilities as the GM of the Edmonton Oilers. Like, how important is it going to be for him to be kind of front facing, making sure that he still is doing all this work?
Yeah, good point, Frankie. I think it's going to be vital because it's put your money where your mouth is. And don't get me wrong, we all know how busy NHL GMs are, and their duties are time consuming, and we get that. We fully understand that. But that's something that Sheldon Kennedy brought up today when we spoke to him right after the press conference. What do you think, Sheldon Kennedy? Well, he gave a vote of support. He wants the conversation to continue. He wants the work to continue. I think that'll go a long way in starting to win back people's trust and support. And, it's up to Stan Bowman to do it, A, and then B, for it to be acknowledged. And if the fans and people in the hockey world see that work that's being done, maybe that needle starts to move and the trust is starting to grow back for Stan Bowman. If that continues and it's on display, I think that'll be important going forward. And you know what, guys? The Oilers organization, by bringing on Stan Bowman, probably has to play a role in this as well. If they're going to support him and bring him on, they need to kind of be in lockstep with him in making sure that that's part of their initiative and motive going forward.
We're chatting with Tom Gazzola in Edmonton on the hiring of Stan Bowman as the GM of the Oilers today. And this would have been Jeff Jackson who made the call. Obviously, ownership has to sign off on it. Everything's been breaking Jackson's way, really, since he got there. I mean, the hiring of Knobloch, someone he was familiar with, someone he was vouching for, that was Grand Slam. The team goes to a cup final. They had a great offseason leading up to this in terms of the players that they capped, the players that they brought in. Everything's moving in the direction of positivity for the Oilers. And what I've noticed, again, based on what I'm seeing online, which isn't a perfect science, obviously, a lot of the reaction to Bowman is because of his history, his involvement with the Kyle Beach situation in Chicago. But also, you look at the way it ended for him in Chicago, it's kind of like Ken Holland's scenario when he was in Detroit. We're very successful, won a bunch of cups, but by the end, he was kind of run out of Detroit because it was really ugly. Like, it was really not a very good scene there. Same thing in Chicago with Bowman. I mean, he made some deals and some signings that were horrendous by the end. In terms of the hockey department and Stan Bowman's role in that, how do you feel about the hiring and the idea that he's the guy that now is going to try to get them over the top? And it's obviously a great job because he's already in a position where he's got a great team.
Yeah, and you started off the segment, Brian. It's a plum position.
Yeah, it's
this
great.
This has got to be one of the most coveted executive roles in all of hockey. I mean, they were right there a month ago, a shot away from tying the game, winning a Stanley Cup. Maybe it didn't happen, obviously. In terms of his ability to be the general manager, I know there's kind of been a shift in the NHL and the hockey world. We're seeing tandems. This is something I asked Jeff Jackson and Stan Bowman at the end of the press conference about, like, how are you guys going to attack this? Because you do have a great scenario going forward with this group. This is basically, on paper, a Stanley Cup contender again. I know we've got a couple months to go before the season kicks up again. It's valid to question his moves at the end in Chicago, and that team is still reeling from the end of the Bowman era. That was valid when Kenny Holland was brought in here as well, because that's a team that has struggled, even with Steve Yzerman at the helm of the ship. It looks like there's some promising things there. But Ken Holland was able to bounce back. He had 5 straight second overall finishes in the Pacific Division, conference final, Stanley Cup final, second round appearance, a couple of misses on the qualifying round, and then the first round loss to Winnipeg. But overall, he was able to redeem himself with his GMing ability, if you will. He was questioned. He didn't win everybody over. I think it'll probably be similar for Stan Bowman. But the added element here is, how does this work with Jeff Jackson? And, you know, we're talking about Leon Draisaitl's contract coming up here and an extension. Connor McDavid's going to be needed to take care of his as well. Evan Bouchard as well. We still think, and even though Jeff Jackson said Stan Bowman's going to be the lead guy, I'm just going to help, we think this is a Jeff Jackson scenario where he's going to be the guy leading the ship for the Oilers and making sure that these deals get done. Now he's got a right-hand man in Stan Bowman that can, you know, play a big part in it. And I think it's a two-man team. And Stan Bowman was the guy that was handpicked by Jeff Jackson to be his co-pilot, basically. So, you know, he's got an opportunity to do what Ken Holland did, and that's kind of show that he's still a good GM in this league. But I think every time a move is made in Edmonton, we're going to think, especially after what happened on Free Agent Frenzy, that Jeff Jackson had a big part to play in whoever comes into this team and whatever deals going forward are made with key players.
It is interesting that Jeff Jackson handpicked Stan Bowman, because he very well could have gone down the same route that he went down with the head coach, where he handpicks a rookie head coach or a younger head coach. He could have done that with a general manager and say, you know what, I'm going to kind of lead the charge. You're going to see out my vision. But he elects to go with Stan Bowman. That comes with, you know, a certain name, a certain pedigree, you know, a certain history. Does having that big name, you know, Bowman, Stanley Cups, Chicago Blackhawks dynasty, does that make it more likely that someone like Leon Draisaitl becomes an Oiler for life, or Connor McDavid is an Oiler for life?
Frankie, I'd probably say no. I'd say no. I don't think that changes their opinion on whether or not they want to stay. Like I know that those guys, they're going to be asked about this decision. They deserve to be. They are pillars on this team. They're pillars in the game. I think you could have promoted somebody from within. The Oilers have 3 assistant general managers right now. They've got a guy in Keith Gretzky who mopped up after the Peter Chiarelli era ended. They've got a guy in Bill Scott who's been around the game on the management side forever. He's their capologist. There are other guys that are out there, other names we heard about. Jason Botterill's been a GM in the National Hockey League. It didn't go well in Buffalo. We know that. He's in Seattle now. Maybe he would be the right guy to ride shotgun with Jeff Jackson. Mark Hunter's name was talked about a lot around here. So it's not like it was just Stan Bowman that could have been brought in. And I honestly don't think that because Stan Bowman's here, it's going to change guys' opinion on if or not they want to come to Edmonton and be a part of something special. I think that all of that groundwork was probably laid and in place. And the fact that Jeff Jackson said, I don't want to be the GM, and then he goes and he knocks it out of the park, signing free agents and reassuring everybody that this team should be for real again next year. It was almost like, and I'd say it here in Edmonton, the general manager's position was almost like a formality, and all the little things that day-to-day a GM would take care of, that was for whoever would be coming in, regardless of their pedigree and their past and their Stanley Cup championships that they may have led a team to. So I don't think it will ultimately change how people perceive Edmonton, and I don't think it would have moved the needle.
Tom, it's great catching up with you, man. It's obviously a unique time out there, that's for sure. And you were there, you witnessed it. We'll see when we hear from Stan again, when we hear from Jeff Jackson. And, the NHL is going to go quiet here until training camps, more than likely. But you'll be all over it like you always do with the coverage out in Edmonton. Appreciate you doing this, man. We'll do it again down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
You got it. Tom Gazzola joining us here. Edmonton Sports Talk host, co-host of Hello Hockey. NHL Network correspondent. Wonder if he got the invite to McDavid's wedding this weekend.
I don't know. Is that this weekend?
I think it is. Yeah, I think there's a lot of buzz going on about that. McDavid, I guess Draisaitl's engaged now too, and boys are all grown up out there in Edmonton, chasing cups.
Yeah, did you hear, who was it? There was a scribe that was talking about how that's going to impact the Oilers next year. Because players, the year after they get married, they have down seasons. And that's
really? It's like the Madden curse?
I think I was talking about it with Jay one night.
Oh, really?
I can't remember who was the scribe that was saying it. He might have been out in New York.
That seems extreme.
It was a little extreme. It was also like very old school and archaic.
Yes, that is a pretty old school move. That I'm pretty sure Draisaitl and McDavid are going to be fine. Not too worried about them.
Yeah.
But, thanks to Tom. And, we'll see. I mean, listen, Stan Bowman, he's won. Jeff Jackson obviously has put a number of pieces together that have worked out very well. The thing is with the Oilers is the bar is so high. Like, they lost 2-1 in Game 7 of the Cup final. That's your bar.
After almost pulling off a reverse sweep, Hayes.
Yes, exactly. So, like anything, you lose in Game 6 of the Cup final, you didn't fulfill last year's numbers. You know what I'm saying? Like, It's Cup or bust, and it's going to be Cup or bust as long as McDavid or Draisaitl are out there, which might speak to why, they would make a move like bringing in Stan Bowman, understanding that the marketplace isn't going to be happy about it, but they feel like there's an urgency to win, and
that's how I read it. I read it like, for those two guys who their futures are up in the air, and basically Edmonton will have those guys back for as long as they want to be back. Really, it's going to be up to them. Hire a guy with pedigree, name, Stanley Cups, and I don't know, maybe it's a message that you're trying to send to those guys, like, hey, we mean business here for a very long time, and we were going to do everything we can to have you a part of it, but I don't know. Like, I really don't know if that factors in that much for those guys.
I don't think it does. They want to be somewhere where they're going to win. They want to get paid. They want to live somewhere where they want to live, right? They want to take history into account. They want to talk facility, like the facilities, the training staff. That matters more than who's up in the front office.
100%. That's a great point, because you see those guys every day. The equipment guys, the therapists. Yeah. If you can go to the liquor store after a game and not get harassed.
Yeah, that counts too. That's something you might want to consider for sure. All right, we'll come back and put a wrap on a busy afternoon. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Frankie, the opening ceremonies rapidly approaching. It's been a lot of negativity today around, Canada soccer, but we do want to give a shout out to Andre DeGrasse and Maud Sharon. Those are our flag bearers in Paris.
Love it. Little positivity. We got a note, we got a tweet earlier saying we were being too negative. I didn't think that was the case, but it's nice to end the show on a positive note.
We just exude positivity all the time. I don't know what people are talking about. We're seeking out the positive stories. If they're there, we'll talk about them. And believe me, once the games start, then we're going to get great stories.
Exactly.
And that's what's coming. And, we'll be in the pool before you know it, Summer Macintosh. There's so much buzz around. It's the beauty of being at a place like TSN is there's so many sports fans, and there's been so many people that follow, such a variety of sports. And I was walking around the halls a couple of days ago, and just, Summer Macintosh chatter just popping up spontaneously. What she's going to do, how many medals she's going to get, what performance will be best for her, and that's what's coming. Once we get going, it's go time. You can put the controversies behind us.
Yeah, and we get to see who creates their story, right? Like who's going to become a household name after this Olympics, because it seems like it happens in Canada every 2 years between the Winter and Summer Olympics. So we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Homegrown talent. They'll be popping up, and it's going to be awesome. Jays back in action tonight. They lost last night, in case you were wondering. Vladdy hit a home run, though. So that's positive, right? You're riding the Vladdy train as long as you can go. But
basically.
Yeah, we're almost at the trade deadline. Mercifully, we're almost there. All right, Frankie. Good stuff, buddy.
Yeah, you too.
I don't know if you're in tomorrow or not, but I know Gord's in here tomorrow, I believe.
I am not. I'm Friday with Gord.
Okay.
Gord and I.
So there you go. Yes, Gord will be back in here tomorrow. We look forward to that. All right. Good stuff. Everyone behind the scenes, thanks for helping out. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate it. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy your games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
We were not negative today, 4 p.m.
No, we were not. We'll chat then.